Hey, thanks for listening to or watching another episode of the Reforge Roundtable, a weekly podcast live on YouTube. If you go to Reforge Gaming on YouTube, we do this every Friday. Our new time is 2 p.m. Eastern. It'll give us a little bit more time for the members-only after show. And this week's a little bit different. The Roundtable's a little bit more full. Some of you familiar with my content, and maybe you've hung out in chats. My brother is beneath me in the Roundtable. Derek is here, and Ginger, Prime, and 30 and Slow Gaming, the weekly hosts of the show along with me, are also here. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Thanks for having us, man.
And if you're a member, you'll get to watch my brother and I tonight in a little bit more. It'll be a different form. And also the after show. So he's going to try and keep it serious for the podcast, though. So he actually has a topic, and we all have topics. We like to bring a topic, each of us, to the show. So the rundown of the show is I'm going to be talking about why Sony is concerned about the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Mainly, their concern is Call of Duty. What's Microsoft's response to that been? Ginger's going to be catching us up on New World, things going on over there. Mike will be, 30 and Still Gaming, will be picking up the Iron Man game leak and how many people are saying, could this probably be the successor to Anthem and everything we saw in Anthem? He's going to be talking about that. And then my brother Derek, he's talking about the trial culture, game trials and demos that might start happening with what Sony's doing with the PS Premium and how he played a pretty front-heavy game and the concern that that could become a norm. So I think I'm going to kick the week off because this was kind of a big one, and I think I want to start the show with this. If you guys didn't know, there are these questionnaires that get sent to big companies when a really big acquisition's going through. They want to see what those people think. And Sony filled out the questionnaire, and they expressed concern specifically about Call of Duty. If Call of Duty becomes exclusive to the Microsoft platform, Sony essentially argued a handful of angles on this, that this is a non-competitive move if they do it. Number one, the cost involved in making Call of Duty, the number of people that work on every single Call of Duty is so big compared to every other basically developer in existence, and how entrenched the game is and how popular it is, it simply cannot be rivaled. And then Microsoft obviously pushed back and said they don't feel like Blizzard Activision has any must-haves, which is a weird thing to say. Apparently they mean you don't have to have it, like you won't die without it is kind of what they meant, which is a weird qualifier. It's like that non-competitive doesn't mean that the other companies die. It just means it's non-competitive. It's bad for the industry. So we covered that this week, and it's weird to me that the guys who are like super in favor of Microsoft are kind of trying to like downplay this deal. I don't necessarily think people have fully grasped how much of the gaming industry is purchased when you buy Blizzard Activision. Namely, Call of Duty being one of the big parts. So I want to know what you guys thought of this. What did you make of this? I'm going to kick it to Ginger first. Ginger, when you saw this story and you saw the response from Microsoft as well as from the community in general, where did you land on this one?
Oh man, let me piss a lot of people off. Where the hell is Final Fantasy VII Remake on Xbox? Yeah. My whole view of this is tied into, I don't like exclusives. I don't want Call of Duty just exclusive to Xbox. I think that hurts Call of Duty. I think one of the things that outside of Halo's Infinite's issues, it's limiting to Xbox and PC. Like, bring it to PlayStation. Benefit the community. Benefit people who want to play Halo. Let them play where the hell they want to. It should be about the game and not the platform. But I do get that, Microsoft's spending $70 billion for this acquisition. What do they get out of it? And that's where I think essentially you get that community playing the game, buying the game. You get it on Game Pass for PC and Xbox, so there is a benefit to having the ecosystems. And I honestly look at all of these deals in a hopes of just what I would call leverage. Microsoft having leverage to say, all right, yes, we own this, but you have this too. Don't keep stuff from us. And that's, I think, a smart business play. So if Sony is worried about Call of Duty going away, well, maybe they should stop spending all of this money keeping games off of the Xbox and vice versa. I don't think it's good for gamers. I'm going to always lean into a gamer first mentality, not a platform first mentality. And there's a lot of debate in that line. I understand the arguments for exclusives and not. And what I'm hoping to see, my ultimate view, I think, for the industry in terms of health and platforms would be everything kind of just evolves into a timed exclusive. okay, yeah, you got it for like outside of like multiplayer games. I don't know why that you have any kind of exclusivity on there, because you want as many people playing. And with the world of cross-play, cross-progression, making a multiplayer game that's only exclusive to your title is setting you up to fail, because guess what people are going to do? They're just going to go back to wherever it's easier for them to play with their friends. And you cannot release a game now where people have to jump through hoops. We were talking in the pre-show before we went live, multiverses, cross-play, cross-progression, and it actually delivers on the combat. Why would me and my kids play Smash? Yes, we like Smash, but this is that fix. It's got the cross-play, cross-prog, so me and my friends are all playing it as well. So it becomes an easier road into it. So for Sony fans that are frustrated, like, answer me this: where is Final Fantasy VII Remake? Why are we seeing so many things locked away to PlayStation? And then, I don't want to see Microsoft go and start locking things away to Xbox. I like their approach, but I fear that if they start doing that, then all we're doing is we're just rooting for $1 trillion company over one multi-billion-dollar company. And I don't think that's good for gaming and gamers specifically. But, I'll let you guys, counter if you have a different view. There are arguments to be made. There is still things we all have to figure out, right? Because, at the end of the day, like, if I guess the key argument that goes against my view is, well, we get games like God of War, we get games like this to drive platform sales, and they're worried that those would go away if we lost the idea of what an exclusive is. But I mean, God of War's on PC, and they're making God of War Ragnarok. Like, I don't think the data shows what that fear is. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, 30. Where did you land on this one?
Well, when they came out, I just started laughing. I was like, how could Sony say this? And then how can Microsoft counter by saying, oh, yeah, we're paying $70 billion for this. But they're really not that big. We really don't care about these games. Like, I'm like, what are you talking about? Right? Obviously, they're downplaying it because they're trying to get it through, because it is a huge, I mean, Diablo is one of the top selling games of all time, right? The franchise. So obviously that's a big game. World of Warcraft, I think at its peak, it had 45 million concurrent players at its peak at one time. It's like, yeah, it's a little bit big deal. Maybe not so much now. And then Call of Duty is the best-selling game on any platform. It doesn't matter, PlayStation, PC, Xbox. It's been number one for first-person shooters for like a decade. So to say that these games are not like consoles selling things. Now, I do think Sony's a little ridiculous by saying that people are going to jump ship, because apparently they don't stream like we do, because there's Sony fanboys and there's the Xbox fanboys. And if you're a Sony guy, you're not going to leave Sony because all of a sudden they give Call of Duty not for free, but on Game Pass. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're going to stick with Sony. And then vice versa. When I first heard this, I said, oh, all right, well, Call of Duty goes on Game Pass when they do get it. Okay, so if you have an Xbox or PC, you can play Call of Duty on Game Pass. And if you're on PlayStation, you're going to have to pay $60, $70. And then I said, oh, well, why did Sony buy Bungie for $7 billion or whatever it was? I said, they'll probably take that and put it on the PlayStation Plus Premium Edition, right? Because they'll be like, oh, well, for Sony fans, you'll get it on the, and this is just my thoughts, this is not true or anything yet, but they'll probably take the PlayStation Plus Premium, get people to come onto their service. They get to play Destiny as they go, but Xbox and PC would have to pay, pony up the money for it. This is just what business is. They're always going to have these exclusives. They're always going to have their games or maps that only come out for the first 6 months, or here's a game license for the first year. I mean, Spider-Man did it for Marvel's Avengers. They've done it over and over again, and yet to throw a rock at a glass house, you know what I mean? Like, or call the kettle calling, you know what I mean? The pot calling the kettle. It's all the same thing. So I just thought it was funny that Sony came out and said what they said, and then Microsoft came back and said, oh yeah, no, we paid $70 billion. None of these games really need, I mean, mobile games are more important than what we're buying. Yeah.
How much of that do you think that $70 billion is for Candy Crush, right? Because isn't that game like bringing in $2 billion a year?
And that alone is right. That alone will make their money back for them.
Yeah.
Well, or Call of Duty Mobile, it does really well. Derek, what do you think about this? Like, Sony saying, hey, if Call of Duty goes exclusive over there, that's not competitive. That's against the spirit of being competitive. But then people are pushing back and saying, look, Sony paid for exclusives in the past, early map access and stuff in Call of Duty.
It's difficult for me to imagine why it would make sense in terms of multiplayer games where the bread and butter of both the user enjoyment or the gamer's fun and the success of the game in the market hinges on lots of people playing together to make that or want that to be exclusive to any one particular console. It makes sense to me to have exclusives like for like this is our God of War game, this is our Mario game. Obviously, they're like flagships for that brand, but they're single player games. So it makes some sense. But if the entire game is, I want to play with my friends, and my friend has an Xbox and I have a PlayStation, and the technology is there to play together, I don't understand why anybody would think it's good to limit that.
Yeah. That's similar to argumentation that I made. It was that if you just think pure business strategy, I don't think Microsoft would do this because estimates are putting it at around somewhere between 30 and 40% of the Call of Duty community plays on PlayStation. And,
right.
to chop that revenue source off, I actually think the shareholders would get involved. They'd be like, you can't do this. You're going to lose so much money. I do think there would be people that would convert. If that was the only place they could buy the new Call of Duty, they would convert. But I don't think enough people would convert to make up the insane number of people that just would be like, I guess I don't play Call of Duty now.
I think people would move over, but the percentage of people moving from PlayStation to Xbox just to play it on Game Pass, I think is so small because for someone to have a PlayStation 5 and then go, you know what, I'm going to spend an additional $500 so I can play a free-to-play game. You know what I mean? Like it's type of for Warzone when you can play it on like a system you already have. I mean, it doesn't make sense in that realm. Now, if you're on the fence, but what Ginger said, you play where your friends are. So if you have four of us here. If Lono buys a PlayStation, Derek will probably buy a PlayStation, and then Ginger go, well, I'm going to play where they're playing, so I'm going to buy a PlayStation as well, right? We're all going to go buy PlayStations based on who of us buys the system first, right? I went Xbox. Right. Okay, I'm going to go with Xbox. And that's usually how the culture works, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, but then once you've got established console user bases, I'm a lot more likely to pony up for 30 to 40 or $50 to play Call of Duty if all my friends are on the other console than I am to cough up another $500 for that console that I don't have any interest in otherwise.
Right. So imagine just this scenario where, 30 and me, we're friends, we're on Xbox, and then all of a sudden the four of us become friends because of work or whatever relationship, and then it's like, oh wait, we can't play this game together. And here's the kicker, though, is now we can. Because these games have now got, cross-play, cross-save, cross-progression. Like this wall has been broken down. It's not across every game, but then that ultimately means like, oh, what are we playing? And it's actually about the games community rather than any console that we prefer. And I believe console preference should still be a choice. And then they should compete off of services, off the technology, and really offer a lot of value to the gamers. But you don't and should not have to be required to buy a piece of plastic just to experience a game nowadays, because right now you're dooming that game to be relatively small in the grand scheme of gaming, etc. And you look at PC gaming and Microsoft's approach. If Microsoft goes and starts making more things locked down just to the Xbox, it goes against everything Phil Spencer has been saying and everything I believe that the company is trying to achieve, where, you know what, your platform should be your choice. If you want a console experience, then here, we're going to have that as an option for you. You want to play on your PC? That's absolutely fine. They're your games. They go where you go. And that freedom and that flexibility, I think, is what gamers crave. And that's why mobile's been kicking consoles' ass every which way from Sunday. We talk about how much mobile gaming makes. I think a big part of that is because of its accessibility, because everybody has a phone. Why would I sit here and have to go buy a Samsung phone to go play this one mobile game? That's ridiculous. That if you do that, that game's not going to sell, even if it's the best dadgum game on the planet.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about that.
Well, and there's a debate in chat about how, well, Sony did this with, exclusivity with Call of Duty. This is a pot meat kettle situation. And I'm like, okay, I don't necessarily think anybody would. There certainly would be people upset, but I don't think Sony would be throwing a flag on the play if Microsoft said, you guys can play this map early, you guys can get these cosmetics or whatever only on Xbox. That's not what they're saying. They're saying if you literally cut off our 120 million user base from playing Call of Duty.
They're not going to do that, though.
I don't think they are either. I just think Sony is expressing that concern through the questionnaire because I think they want that in the dialogue. If the FTC is going to oversee this and say, listen, we're not going to tell you guys what to do, but if this game gets taken off of all these other platforms, that's anti-competitive, which would then, they would step in at that point. Maybe. I again, don't think the FTC is going to have to do anything because the shareholders of Microsoft would say, you are absolutely brain dead if you're going to cut off that revenue stream thinking that by that time, they're hoping to maybe have 40 or 50 million Game Pass subscribers.
Right.
That's nothing compared to the Sony user base.
Right, that'd be against what Microsoft wants to do. They already said they're not taking Call of Duty away from PlayStation, right? Why would they? Because if 40% of the population is playing on PlayStation, why take away 40% of your profits, especially when you paid $70 billion for that company, right? You want to make as much money as fast as possible back, as possible. So,
but that's also not a one-time kind of venture. They've got Warzone, very popular battle royale. Yeah. It gives them a lot of recurring revenue that's going to go year over year. Now, I do have a question about this though. Could we see, them leverage this as a way of getting Game Pass on PlayStation? So one of the things I've often wondered myself is that if Microsoft has more IPs, would we see them offer that as as a thing over on the PlayStation brand? All PlayStation technically would have to do is allow xCloud to run on their browser on their device. It doesn't necessarily mean native, but it does mean that because on my Xbox I can run Stadia and GeForce Now. So it would be a matter that it would be hey, here's your browser. We're going to allow the streaming. What do you guys think?
I hear what you're saying, but I don't see Microsoft. I don't see Sony letting Game Pass come onto their system. I just don't. That's like having a Coke factory, let Pepsi put their products inside their gift shop. You know what I mean? It's like I don't think that's going to happen.
But if that gift shop is the only way to get sugar for your soda.
I hear what you're saying. But I just feel because then would they return the favor and put PlayStation Plus Premium on Xbox? You know what I mean?
I would to get more options for Game Pass. Then my Netflix runs on my Xbox and my PlayStation, so I don't care. At the end of the day,
I wouldn't be surprised if long term that kind of stuff shifted more towards everybody's okay or more okay with the other system working on our system. I mean, it took 20 years to get Sega games on Nintendo consoles, but it did happen. I don't know that it's going to happen next year, but I would think eventually.
No. I still think in kind of what does 2030 plus look like, right? Yeah. What's the landscape as more people just end up becoming more service oriented as opposed to platform? But that's going to be a time because there are those diehard fanboys who, for whatever reason are just actively rooting against the other platform. But I look at the competition as a way of keeping game prices low, making good games, trying to always, one up each other, which again, that could be a dig on the exclusivity factor if those things go away. But in terms of multiplayer games specifically, you're cutting yourself off at the knees if all of a sudden you say,
agreed.
Yeah. Well, especially in the age of Twitch and content creation. Go ahead.
Well, Derek said about Sega. Sega didn't do that until after the Sega Dreamcast went away, right? They didn't have a system.
Yeah, you did have one company losing first.
They lost.
It would be nice to see the cooperation happen in a way that didn't require the death of one of the two.
The only way I see maybe Game Pass playing nice with Sony is that they just did a deal with Samsung to get on their televisions, the smart TVs. I can see them putting Game Pass, maybe allowing it to be on the Sony televisions or something like that. But at that point, I think Microsoft's going to make a little dongle like the Google TV or whatever, or the Fire Stick, which you can buy and just put into any TV that you want anyway. So I think that's the way they're going to go.
Yeah, that and then is that endgame though? Because then if all of a sudden you just have this $99 dongle that you just plug into your TV and all of a sudden you have an Xbox ready to rock and roll, I think that all of a sudden when you start thinking about adoption, you start changing the narrative of why would I buy a console? All of it, when you start thinking about India coming online.
They don't care about software or hardware sales anymore. They just want you to pay a monthly fee for Game Pass. I have 3 friends right now that travel all over the place, and they just play on their laptop. They just buy Game Pass. They don't own an Xbox. They just paid for Game Pass and they're playing it on their laptop.
Yeah, I think long term the challenge there for Microsoft is going to be what happened to Netflix, which is you have to keep filling the funnel with subscribers, but the first party content is so expensive. Like Netflix spent so much money on shows like Stranger Things and Ozark and all these shows, and then they started canceling them after the first 2 seasons because the ROI was terrible. They weren't getting enough new subscribers to pay back what they spent. And you got to think, Microsoft with these acquisitions and the operating costs of these companies, you have to wonder, like, are you going to be spending so much money for all these great first-party titles, but you just simply can't make enough from your subscriber base? There have been people predicting, like, in a couple of years, they're going to have to raise the price of it because if they get to 50 million adoption, then you raise the price by $5. You might be able to make up the difference because these games, these companies, the budgets for these big, huge titles that they're probably hoping to throw on Game Pass, that's a real challenge because you can't make any more money from that person. It's not like when somebody bought Netflix and watched Stranger Things and then watched Ozark and then watched something else that was original content like Queen's Gambit. They didn't make any more money on that person because they watched more content. That's it. That's all you get from them. That, like, your margin on that customer's capped. And I think that's going to be a challenge for Microsoft's strategy. I think it can work. They can become the Netflix of gaming. But the question is, are they also going to become like Netflix and just they're going to run out of money as far as the products that they have to make?
If the business model is essentially infinite growth, then it's
that's always business. That's all businesses, right?
Well, but that's brain dead in the long term.
Yeah.
To think we can infinitely grow forever, it doesn't make any sense. It'd be much better to try to come to some sort of sustainable, long term, like this is how much we can make this year. We'll make about the same much next year. Everybody's comfortable, everybody's happy, and we can do this for a long time, rather than the minute we get a quarterly report that says earnings are not 5% above last time, then we lose all of our stock investors and the cold market goes bust and we lose and people get laid off. It's madness. It's madness.
The only thing here in terms of kind of like the counter view in that regards is that that's what Netflix is. Whereas opposed to Microsoft is also selling software services, the Azure back end, just like when we'll talk about New World here in a second, but New World's also a giant advertisement for AWS and their services and the gaming structure for Amazon. And like in terms of it, it's like if you have one avenue, which for Netflix is entertainment, a downturn does mean of a lack of confidence in the product in the future. But where it would come in terms of Microsoft is that they're still selling games direct. They're still like, it's not just this is the only avenue. It's not like they turn off the ability to buy the games directly. It just adds as a kind of a barrier. And this will actually go more into you, Bruno. I like that so much, in terms of your name, but where we'll get into your subject about demos and front loading and things like that later in the show, because there's just, I think, so many parallels to the point where when y'all were talking about this, like there is a concern that we as gamers have to be and think of at least having the back of our head. It's that, like, are they building in a methodology in which that it's almost near impossible for a new competitor to step in the field unless you're a multi-trillion-dollar company? Who else could spin up something like this and be able to purchase enough content, not just in building from scratch, but also like, EA's talking about wanting to be able to be sold, or if that ends up panning out to be true, who has the capital to purchase that kind of relationship to deliver the content? We saw Amazon bought MGM, then they actually just redid their whole Prime dashboard for their video player. Thank the Lord, because that was just hot garbage before. But in terms of it, it's like that's where all of a sudden you start seeing the players, the big dogs, the big money kind of coalescing into kind of like 2 to 3 options. And that could not be a good thing in the long run.
Real quick, Microsoft already said that they're not worried about PlayStation, right? They're worried about the other guys, which is Google, and we laugh at Google right now because of Stadia, but you just said it, like $1 trillion company. All they have to do is buy the right things, and they're in the game, right? So we look at it now, like for instance, Sega Dreamcast doesn't exist anymore, and PlayStation started thriving back in the day, and they weren't even a member. It was Atari, Nintendo, then it was Nintendo and Sega, right? And then all of a sudden, now PlayStation came in, and now PlayStation's king. PlayStation is the main, and then Nintendo's always been there, right? They have their core group. They'll never get rid of that. And then you have Xbox came in 2000. They've been around for 20 years. Now Xbox is trying to be what PlayStation did in the 90s. They're trying to do in streaming, right? Game services for Microsoft going forward. And who are they competing against? Well, Amazon can buy a lot of stuff. Google can buy a lot of stuff, right? And those are the two main competitors that they were trying to establish a foothold right now. And PlayStation's like, hey, you know what? Maybe we should get in bed with Microsoft. Hence why they did the Azure thing like 3 years ago to get their streaming stuff going on. So these two guys, even though the fans love like Coke and Pepsi or Xbox and PlayStation, they're in bed together, right? They're the leads of the industry. And they don't want a third person to come in, right? It's like they don't want a third party to come in and start taking their revenue away from them. So they're trying to work together, even though they're working against each other, but they're still trying to work together to keep their future alive.
As somebody who's really into technology, like the Stadia's core weakness is content. They have the best streaming platform. Like playing games on Stadia is so far the best cloud streaming platform that exists. It is a content drought, and that is their core problem.
Their business model sucks.
Well, that, and then the fact is that they had their own studios trying to make their own games, and then they closed that down, and that's where I got pissed at Google, because it's like they have one of the problems with cloud gaming is why, is answering the question why. What can you do in a cloud gaming environment that you can't do anywhere else? And no one's been able to do that. There are things, in terms of gaming that you can imagine, but no one's built them in a way that makes them actually fun. So we haven't yet answered that thing. And that's when Google, they shut down their first party studios. I was like, that was a big disappointment for me personally, namely because I was like, maybe they'll be the person who gets to come out with a game that's like, oh, now I see the potential in having unlimited servers and processors to run a game or something like that. But we're still waiting.
Well, speaking of waiting, I think there's a lot of people waiting on whether or not it's a good time to get back into New World, and so I want to hear what's going on. What's going on in New World right now, Ginger? And should I ever come back and play? That's the question.
Oh, the answer is yes. I would absolutely love for you to jump back in to New World. And if you've been away for, I would say, if you've been on a break from New World for at least 3 months, now is a really good time to jump back in. It's not all good news. We've had a couple of bugs this week, not game-breaking bugs, mind you, but bugs where you just kind of get a little bit annoyed. It's like, oh, come on. Like, why? Like, I got a reward of 0 Azoth. Like, it shows me the vial, and it gives me a 0, and I'm like, did I get any or not? And no, I didn't get any. So I was like, just a little bit like, okay, come on, guys. Like, nothing again, it doesn't break the game. I'm not sitting here like, can't play today because of this bug. Not at all. Like they've gotten all that, I think, fixed up and wrapped up and cleaned up, but you're just kind of like hoping for, that smooth, ready to go. But in terms of content, right, this is kind of where it's kind of step A or step B, because if I can't get you back into New World in August, we do have a big thing coming up around the 1 year for the game with the Greatsword, the new zone, more dungeons, leaderboards. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's just right on the horizon that I'm personally very excited about. But in terms of what we have today is they have the Summer Medley Fair, in which they introduce musical instruments, which you play and level up and can actually give buffs to people who are just hanging out listening to you. It's a Guitar Hero rhythm game. So it's not just like I'm playing this music and then I get some points. Like, it's an actual fun mini game that's going on. The downside, like I said, it's not all good news. We were supposed to get a new dungeon and the party finder system, but that appears to be delayed, and we're assuming that's coming in next week. Ultimately, they delayed it. You want if there's like a critical bug or something that's going to break the overall gamer experience, it's a good call. It's still never fun to say, hey, this got delayed. Okay, when's it coming? We believe next week. They're testing it out on the PTR right now. But new dungeon, new content. It's easy to get into dungeons, especially with the party finder. No more keys to be able to jump in. You literally can just go and run the dungeons. And that's one of the things we talked about, like the last time I brought up New World on the Roundtable, is that their dungeons, their expeditions are incredible. And I've actually been doing so many more of them and having a really good time with it. But I would say that in terms of coming back, I would say for you, Lono, like you should come check out the Medley Fair, at least do the quest, because the summer event will end at the end of August, like August 21st. That way you can, at least get some of the rewards that they have. They've got some really great emotes and things like that to collect. But in terms of coming back, I would definitely say, like, if you didn't get hooked by the changes that are a part of the summer update, the fall update with the new weapon, the new zone, is going to be something I think pretty exciting, because I think we'll also see Amazon probably turn on some marketing around that time, which will drive some hype and drive some people back into the game. And they'll want people who know what's going on with it, so that's, in terms of content creation, my New World channel is doing really great, because there's people who are generally returning, and I'm seeing a lot of returning players that have been gone since like October, November, December, and they're coming back and they're telling me they absolutely love it. So I would say at 3 months, this is definitely a time to return. But if you're burned out of the game, the fall update is going to be a better time.
Do you think they're going to put advertisement, some sort of like skin or something of the Rings of Power inside of New World?
Oh man, they did something already with the time, like with their one show
Wheel
in
of
terms
Time.
of Twitch drops, Wheel of Time, and I that's one of the things that New World has going for it in terms of just marketing potential. That's not actually having to buy marketing, like in terms of ads and or like paying a big content creator to stream your game. They literally just put out drops, and the numbers show this. Like I was doing some analysis on the game, because we've seen a big chunk of people return. Numbers are actually going up. I don't think they're going to stay going up in that regards, but obviously content will bring people back, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of new players start. We're seeing a lot of players return, but at the same time, we're still also seeing players like that. Like I had a guy said, like he's put in 3,000 hours of the game and he just needs a break. And I'm like, I don't blame you. I'm at 400 hours. I'm 400 hours on live, 100 hours on the PTR for myself, and I'm having a blast. I'm not at 3,000 hours. I think at 3,000 hours, like, yeah, everybody needs a break, man. Like there's a lot of really good games you probably missed, to go play those for a little bit. That's
or real life,
or just go take a walk, man. Like enjoy life.
Do you think that the new area will have a new fishing spot and maybe some new fishing rods that you could buy?
Yeah,
because I think I will play the game now.
The summer event actually has like a really good fishing rod. If you haven't done the legendary quest, it's got Lucky Waters day and night and Colossus day and night. Like I was like, this is a really good fishing rod. For anybody who's...
let me pitch you on fishing inside of Sea of Thieves. Okay, Sea of Thieves is. No, I'm just.
Oh, I wish there was fishing in
Can
Sea
you
of
catch
Thieves.
the Hyrule
There is
Loach?
fishing in Sea of Thieves, Lona. What are you talking about?
You can fish?
Yes, it's been in the game for like 2 years.
What do you fish with?
A fishing rod.
hole.
But what do you do with the fish when you catch it?
You
Shove it
cook
in your
them and
butt?
you turn them in, and there's a whole faction for fishing. What are you talking about?
They just blatantly ripped off New World.
I didn't listen, in my defense, I was just trying to get gold, and not get griefed, so I never took the time to fish. To bring it back so that we can have maybe a beneficial discussion here. This is my dilemma with a game like New World. I feel like there's two players that are vital to the future of that game. There's players like me, and there's players who just really haven't played the game yet, okay? And I think one of the challenges is, now that I'm disconnected and I don't know what's going on, I don't feel like I have an inroad back into the game. It's almost like when you go into a grocery store and the layout is all wrong, even though it's a Kroger, you're like, where the f is everything? Like, what's going on? So I don't want to feel that way. And then a new player also, I feel like what happens with games like this is they just are tacking all the value down here. So if you're in and you know the game and you're familiar, you're like, this is great. This improvement's awesome. This new thing's awesome. All the value's down here. Everything back here is, it's almost too much. It's too dense for the new player or the returning player to feel like they can plug in. How do you solve that? Because I do think that feels like the ship has sailed. It's like you're never going to get me back in. You're never going to get new players back in because we feel like we don't fit. We're not on the front of the wave where all those value improvements make sense and touch down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think essentially you solve that by continuing to kind of refine that core leveling and solo experience, that casual-esque experience. We've talked about this before. Like as the game, has evolved, like originally it was like this hardcore PvP, full loot, etc. And then they've gone and they've adjusted it. They added in the story, etc. Now, one of the things they do in the story is like once you beat the Tempest, like this really cool cutscene plays. And it's beautifully animated. It's not like in-game graphics. It's beautifully drawn. Like, and it kind of talks about this and sets up what's to come next. And I saw that cutscene and I was like, they need to bring that in at level 1, level 5, level 10. They need to be bringing in that same kind of style to kind of hook people into the kind of the lore in the world. Just because somebody who's coming to play, having that experience. But then I think it literally is about content. And it's not just about content that pushes for level 60 players like myself, but it's content that goes throughout. And that's actually the musical system that they added is a piece of that. It's something where it's like it's not game breaking. It's not going to be required. You're not going to have to log in and level up music just so that you can be a part of some guild or some kind of end game thing. It's just a really cool system that you can actually benefit from by just being in the game. It's a very social, very connected system. But I think, really what they need is they need more content in terms of PvE, more dungeons. They're removing a lot of the barriers of friction. And then ultimately what ends up happening in my mind is it all comes down to, do they do an expansion? An expansion announcement ends up acting kind of as a commitment of trust because they say they're in for 10 years, but an expansion actually starts to communicate and build that up. So what happens is that starts off a whole new hype cycle. So for players who have fallen away or might not be connected, you bring in systems that kind of say, hey, welcome back to the game. We see that you've been gone for 6 months. Let's point you to some of the cool things that you can do right away. And let's talk about some of the things that you could do maybe in 10 levels. And then all of a sudden you really kind of have that carrot on a stick. So it's not overwhelming. It's like, hey, welcome back. There's a lot that we want to go over, but we're not going to talk about all of it right now. You don't need to go watch some 2-hour YouTube video going through all the details. It's like, hey, Lono, welcome back. Did you know, like, you haven't run this dungeon yet and it's new? And you know what? We're going to get you a party. Why don't you go check that out? Or here's some quests that you could pick up that's going to get you some cool rewards. And then you just kind of start easing yourself back in. And then the game, like, I think there's some tutorial magic that could really go a long way because you shouldn't be required to go look up a YouTuber, but that's also a problem of the MMORPG. And I think ultimately, when you look at what gets people back in the game, content, and content in which that people are talking about it. If people are making YouTube videos, if people are streaming it, if people are talking about it, like ultimately, like you might be curious. And there is the fact that there's no subscription, I think is going to be something that benefits the game in the long run, because then it's not like, hey, go spend money just to come see if you really want to see what's all changed,
What you said, Lono, that's where I'm at, right? I'm at level like 42, 43, right? And I've been away for a while. And the last time Ginger talked about it, I went to go play it that weekend and played it for like maybe another 3-4 hours. And I felt overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do, where to go. I felt like because the group that I was with, they all left and abandoned, I had to like find new friends inside the guild that I was in. Like other people were doing other things and I wasn't part of that circle anymore. So I'm just like a little lost. And I'm like, well, do I start over? Do I start a brand new character? Do I want to grind again up to the same level that I already am? No, I don't, right? Derek's like shaking his head. No, you don't want to do that. And so this is my problem with New World, and not just New World, any game like this, where you're gone for a bit and you come back. If you're gone more than a month, you forget what you were doing, you forget where you were going, you forget all the stuff you were like, I had all this stuff I was going to do. It all changes and you're like, okay. So it takes you a little bit to get used to it again. And just like Ginger just said, like I have to go watch a video to go, okay, at this level, what should I be doing? Where should I be going? And at that point, I'm like, you know what? I'll just go play multiverses because it's just much easier to get into and play, right? And that's my problem with New World or any other open world or MMO type of game. It's just overwhelming when you stop playing. You're either in on the ground, or if you stop, you're lost for a bit, and you have to have a group of people to go back in with it to enjoy it.
Yeah, and that's why like content is a way of like inviting that back in. We've been playing the game Friday nights on stream, getting players, a lot of people coming back, and then helping them like as a part of that. And that's where like in terms of the MMO, it's such a challenging problem to solve, because I don't think any MMO has really solved it outside of becoming just a single player game like Final Fantasy 14. And people are like, well, Final Fantasy 14 is not a single player. It's like, oh, well, you're wrong. Like it is going more and more single player by the day. And then it still has the multiplayer. And so honestly, that becomes a model. That becomes a model for welcome back. Let's get you back into the game. Let's hold your hand for a while until you're ready to say, you know what, let me just, I'm good. I don't need this, a pointer or something like that. I'd just rather explore.
I wonder if like the most unlikely game might have a way to do this, because I was just thinking about every time No Man's Sky does an expedition and I jump into the expedition, I get to enjoy all of the early parts of No Man's Sky. There's that new car smell. Everything's fresh. Everything's new. You're going through, but it's so fast. You go through all those steps and things, and you're getting rewards very quickly because you're checking off all of the things. Like, I wonder if that's the way. Can you give somebody that experience when they come back, where they're sort of quickly flying through the early stages of the game and getting reacclimated, and along the way you're dropping all those, here's the new stuff that we added? Because in No Man's Sky, if you take a big break and then you come back and do an expedition character, you're gonna be like, what is all this stuff you're having me do? But the expedition, it's almost like it's drinking from a fire hose, but it's doable somehow. Like, I have a framework and understanding of No Man's Sky that I think helps me. I think a brand new player might struggle a little bit with an expedition character because it's presuming that you know certain things.
Mm-hmm.
But
actually,
go ahead.
I was just real quick. The expedition is really nice because it gives you structure, what to do, and then at the end of the expedition, you can either keep that character and move him into a regular save, or you just start another expedition on the next one, right? And you still get to keep all the stuff you get. So it's a nice little cutout where you're not overwhelmed, where you had this base, you're like, what was I doing? You're like, oh, expedition. I want to go get this ship. What do I have to do? Go do this mission. So it's hand holding, but it's a much better way of doing it to get people back into that game.
And if you have an existing,
that reintroduction.
Well, and if you have an existing save, you can hand all that stuff over when you're done. So like in New World, I could go through a process like this, and it wouldn't be abandoning my character that has all my stuff. Like, I have a saved character right now, but when I grab onto him, I feel like I'm in a foreign world. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. But if you took me through that process, I come out on the other end of it. I can hand some of the stuff I got, some of the stuff I've gained. I can hand it all over to my main save. That's a great baton pass. Boom. And now I'm in. I'm going to go to the new area, check out the new content.
They could also remind you in that, as of the story so far, what you've experienced, and then set you right up for the next chapter, so that in a condensed way, you're not like, oh, I got to go level and do all this. It's like, no. Welcome back. We see you jump back in. It's working. It's teaching you about the game, while, again, like you said, telling you the story. And then ultimately it would be kind of a returns tutorial. And then, like you said, you're like, okay, cool. Now merge with my character. And then it's like, okay, cool. I remember and what I was doing, where I was, and that the story so far, mindset within RPGs, I wish every RPG did. Dragon Quest XI did, and it was incredible, because I like to play games and take breaks like everybody, like every human being and normal gamer. And so every time I'd come back to Dragon Quest XI after a little bit of a break, it's like, it reminds me exactly what's been going on. And it's great, because then I'm like, okay, I'm ready to get back into the story. So I definitely agree. I think that would actually go a long way. I don't see that happening anytime soon in terms of tutorialness, but you never know. They surprised us with musical instruments, so they could be thinking of that as well.
I even said they should do seasonal characters in New World, because that early land rush is so fun. Like, if you know you're going into a server with other like seasonal characters, and everybody's starting out brand spanking naked new,
right? You gotta find them to help. Yeah,
that's so fun.
That's something we're wondering if that's going to happen next, because the servers, there are queues in the hundreds, for multiple servers. So people are like, man, and we're wondering if the game maintains that player base that it has with the summer. If you go into the fall and you see a big returning, they might just be spinning up new servers just to handle all the returners.
Yeah. Well, poor Derek doesn't have anything to say about New World, but he played a game recently that I wanted him to talk about, and it's related to something we've talked about in my stream, which is PlayStation Premium is adding game trials for games that are above a certain price threshold. And I have predicted that is a future cultural shift that will happen. I think in a couple of years, everyone's just going to kind of expect to be like, hey, I'm paying for a subscription. You better be letting me try these games out. I don't want to get burned. I've been burned too many times. But what about the front-heavy game? Is that going to be the result? So what was this game you played, Derek, and what was your experience? Because some of it sounded similar to what people said about Elden Ring, and this is like an indie title.
Well, yeah, because we already have the problem where some games come out and the first bit of the game, or even the first 2/3, is a lot better, and then either the end game is unsatisfying or just not as good as the opening segment or the opening slog. The game I played is Anno Mutationem. I've seen a couple streamers who call it Anno Mutationem, so I'm not sure the pronunciation. And if you were to just played it for an hour, like on a trial, or even if you just watched somebody do a first look, or if you look at the reviews that are available, and presumably they didn't finish the game, you don't have an accurate idea of what to expect from the game as far as the quality, the fun of the game, the way it plays out. Because on its face, and during the first bit when you're playing, there's a skill tree I can see what I'm going to do as I earn my skill points and how I can build so the combat is basic but punchy. This is fun. I can see how this will be fun as I progress. The story is at least interesting enough to get you invested to keep playing. The graphics are beautiful. The sound, the best thing about the game was the music, actually. But real quickly, about halfway through, and I'd say it's maybe an 8 or 10 hour game to get everything. Man, the quality just drops off. Cutscenes where you can hear what's going on and maybe the subtitles are working, but there is no visual. It just doesn't play the visual. The cinematic doesn't play at all. It's just a blank screen. Or there were trophies that pop, like, oh, you've got 100% of the side quests, but there were still side quests I had not done yet, so I would have missed them if I hadn't been looking at a guide for something else I wasn't finished doing. So if you're a completionist, the idea that you could get 100% of the game you hadn't done everything in is bothersome to me. It gave it the final end of game achievement went like I had it, but there was an entirely second alternate or better ending that I hadn't unlocked yet. So there was so much in the back half of the game that was just amateur hour. And you would never see that in a 1 or a 2 or even a 50% of the game trial. You would never see that in a first look or the first hour of gameplay video. And I'm convinced that most of the people who reviewed it and gave it 8s and 9s didn't play it past the part where it looks really pretty and seems like it's going to be fun, and then 8 out of 10. When viewed on the whole, it'd be like watching a movie that's so awesome, but then the last half of the movie is they have a different cinematographer and they had to replace one of the actors, and the guy doesn't know his line. It gets
special effects budget, we use all the special effects in the first half.
That actually happens a lot. Just let you know.
and like you see in a lot of the movie industry, all the coolest parts of the game that are only a few minutes
in the trailer,
they stretch out into looking bigger than they are, and they put them in the trailer, and you're like, oh man, this game is gonna kick ass, and it doesn't. Or it does, but in just a small enough dose that you end up feeling like, well, this could have been great, but it isn't. And so I would worry that when we see huge successful games that lots of people think are wonderful, but with endgame trouble or endgame criticisms, all the way up to things like Elden Ring. And then when I play an indie game like this, where I think, well, I want to support an indie studio, so I'll pay them, and it looks cool. It looks like it's the kind of thing I want to play. It's got a chiptune aesthetic, and the music is really synthwave, and I thought, this looks great. But then I'm in for the money that whatever it costs, $30 or $35 or whatever, and then I feel really burned. Or any player who tries it is like, well, I wanted this to be great, but it's not. And so I when you want to support indie developers because you've played Limbo and Inside and Journey, and they were some of the top 10 games in your memory ever, And so you're like, okay, I'm going to do it again. And then then it kind of leaves a sour taste in your mouth because it'd be like if the last half of Limbo was just garbage. You'd never would have bought that studio's next game.
Right.
So now if whatever the company is that did Anno, and if they did another game that had similarly appealing graphics and awesome sound design, but I know now not to trust it. So even if the next game's great, I'm not going to trust the reviews. I guess this is getting off topic, but I would love it if anytime you read a professional review of a game, if you can see their gamer profile and did they finish it? Did they even get the second trophy that 60% of people don't get? Or are they reviewing it based on...
Are you trying to say
that also
journalists don't finish games? That's not true, is it?
And I'm not saying that you have to finish a game to give me an accurate idea of what to expect, but it would be nice if I could know.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Did you play more than one game in the new Madden before you told me it's a 10 out of 10? Did you play a season? Did you do anything? Or did you just say, oh, it's Madden, so I'll give it a good review?
I've seen people like really get frustrated at the review process for the legacy media in terms of that they want to see people like live stream it and have that experience. And that kind of affirms what I believe is happening anyways. People are going to live streams more for reviews and going to reviews more to, I guess, back up their purchasing habits. Like I've already bought it. I want to see if they, if this person agrees with me or at least makes me feel good about spending the money.
Right. In this game's case, the only places I found where it looked like the people I was reading had played the whole thing were because they had written a guide. Mm-hmm. And so then the problem was they were like, I loved every minute of this game. And I find that to be impossible because there were parts of the game that sucked. Even if you there are parts of Fallout 4 that are terrible, and even though it's one of my favorite games, I'm not wearing rose-colored glasses if I talk about it. But when the person I'm reading talk about this game that I just tried to enjoy and found to be sorely lacking is like, oh yeah, this is one of the best games I've played in the last 10 years. What are you talking about? You forgot to mention that the alternate ending isn't visibly missing from your experience unless you check a guide. Like the game is in some ways in the end game broken. And so then you're like, well, can I find any objective or at least fairly, in a fair way, subjective review or perspective on this game that isn't just trying to get me to buy it?
I think the indie development team, like the era that we're in now, if you remember, I think you're about my age. I'm 44, right?
Yeah,
yeah. So remember Nintendo games back in the day, there was a crap ton of Nintendo games and Atari games that you paid full price. You would pay $60, right? I remember my mom picked up Yara's Revenge for the Atari 2600. It was $80 back in the day, right? Back in like 1984 or whatever it was. And those games were short, right? And they were all independent game developers back then. There weren't major corporations or big things like this happening because they were all at the start. Right. So a lot of games are just crap, right? You would play it, you would get 5 hours in, and all of a sudden, like you couldn't get past this one level, and they made it super difficult because there was no end to that game, and they didn't want you to pass it because they ran out of budget or they ran out of money. So it sounds like this particular game. I looked it up a little bit to see the graphics and stuff, and it does. It looks very interesting. I think for independent games, it all depends on the cost, right? If it's like a $30 game and it's an 8-hour total gameplay, you get burned, right? You would get burned on that one, but then you would, just like you said, that game developer now, when they come out with their next game, you're gonna be like, I don't know if I want to pick up from them anymore. I'm gonna hold back and wait. And the beautiful part about today is that there's people like Lono or Ginger or myself, or there's hundreds and thousands of people playing a game and giving you enough time to look at a game and see if you want to make or play it or not play it, and ask questions to people. So I think that's something better than it was in the past, because there was nothing in the past, right? You had to get a paragraph of it in like Nintendo Power or something to tell you that.
Yeah, it's certainly easier to get at least, or to try to do your due diligence and find out.
Yeah.
A game like this that almost nobody bought, it's hard to find anybody giving you a good, accurate picture.
Right. Well, and then game journalists, they say a game is hard when they can't get past the tutorial, and then other people give a review of a game that they played 8 hours, but the game is 20 hours long, and they give you a whole full review. So there's a lot of problems that are wrong in the industry, what's happening. But independent games, I think at this point, if you like a game based on what it looks and the story sounds interesting to you, and you're about 3-4 hours into the game, and then it starts to get, shitty or crappy or whatnot, then you kind of just eat that money, right? Where there's other games that are open world where you'll play. I mean, hell, I played Marvel's Avengers, played through the whole story. It was like 15 hours when it came out. Thought it was good. But then the end game stuff, or Anthem, for instance, that once you got to the end game, there was no game, and that's why people wanted to play that game, because it's a looter and it's an end game. But the end game was terrible, right? So, is it fair to say that you put 120 hours into a game and then go, well, I got gypped out of my money because I put all this time in?
I'm on the side that says that that's not really a fair. It's like eating your entire meal and then demanding you shouldn't have to pay for it because the French fries were cold. Like, get out of here.
Right. Exactly.
And then not tipping your server even though it's not their fault.
Yeah, like Fallout 76. I played 82 hours. I had no problems, no glitches, no nothing. And then all of a sudden, my character went into the armor and he went invisible. And then I couldn't interact with the world. I couldn't get out of my armor. It was literally game breaking. I was like, well, okay, then I guess this game's broke, but I already put 82 hours into it. So should I demand my money back? Should I, you know what I mean? Like, it's hard to say and where the industry goes. This hurts the industry, especially if people are just making a game to make money off of the people, right? Consumers, but without giving a full, proper, flushed out game. It does make it look bad. I mean, even Cyberpunk, when it didn't work for half the people, it left a bad taste in the mouth. So the next game that CD Projekt Red makes, you're going to be like, Bethesda's going through that right now with Starfield. People are giving crap to Starfield because of Fallout 76, not because of Fallout 3 or Fallout 4. Before, it was like little bugs, and they're like, it's Bethesda's charm. It's just broke. Yeah. Now, Fallout 76, you're like, I don't know. I'm going to hold off on Starfield now.
As somebody who enjoys like games as a service games, like I'm more than willing to kind of let the game work its way out and find its life and its find its issues and its balancing, because I mean multiplayer games and service games, like, they do take a little while, and I think studies show this, and so like in terms of what you just said, it rings real true. Like Anthem, I was more than willing to give Anthem the time it needed to really kind of flesh itself out and become what it could potentially be, but then EA pulled and put a stopper on it. So for me, where I look at what y'all are saying and apply it to the games that normally kind of appeal to me, no, EA doesn't get another shot. They said they were going to do something. They said they were going to put in the work, and it's BioWare more than EA. EA invested in that game for 7 years. It made an insane amount of money, but the fact that they said no, like, makes me go like, I'm not going to be there until you prove that your game is going to be around next time. So there's no beta testing, there's no day one. It's literally like, hey Brian, are we like, if they ever did something, with one of their other things, it's a games as a service. Is like, no, they don't. They've done it. They said they were going to stick around with it, but then they pulled the plug. And
when you have the reasonable expectation that a large studio with a gigantic game that's supposed to be, at least in principle, a service game or an updated game over time, you have the reasonable expectation that things that are wrong will get fixed or patched. But then a game like this, there's a game like this where there's typos in the dialogue, where there's load screens that don't need to be there, that interrupt, they're not going to fix that. They didn't finish it in the first place. Even was it Crystal Dynamics that was behind the new Tomb Raider games?
Yes.
Yeah, but to my knowledge, the first game in that trilogy still to this day across platforms has a glitch towards the end game where if you do the fast travel system from this one specific place to the place in the last 2 hours of the game, it corrupts your save file and you cannot continue. You have to start completely over from go. And that was a glitch that was known before it was even ported over to be on more than one.
You have to lower your expectations, Derek. You have to. I mean, this is 2022. There's games now that are not even complete when they come out, right? I mean, this is the way.
But you can't patch it so that my save file doesn't get ruined. Give me, or like in your case, so my character went invisible and now I cannot play a game I put 90 hours into.
You have to wait like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before they fix it. Someone in the chat says we're getting off topic, but we're really not. Him saying that there's a game incomplete for trial, right? Like you paid for it, right? Even if you got a trial on PlayStation and you're like, oh, they give you the first 30 minutes. Like Tunic did this, right? Tunic put it on Xbox, a demo about, I don't know, 5 months ago. It was back in like November, or actually longer than that, November last year. And just playing Tunic, I was like, oh, this is great. I'm going to get this game when it comes out. And I did. And it was a fantastic game when I played it. Now, that's the good. The bad is a game like this, if it showed the first hour of missions or whatever and you played it, you're like, oh, this is a really good sale. And then all of a sudden you get this game and then it's not as good anymore.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing which is happening with live service games nowadays, where the game's out and they give you that front-loaded part where you're like, oh, I mean, we're going to bring up Anthem a lot right now, but Anthem, great fighting mechanics, great flying mechanics, great all this. That hooked you in. The graphics were great. The mechanics, the core was great, but then the game itself was just... Right? Same with Marvel's Avengers. Oh, man, Marvel, right? You get to be Iron Man, you get to be Thor, you get to be Captain America, and then all of a sudden, the end game, you're like, oh. Man.
The single-player story, though, like one of the things that like I really enjoyed about the Marvel's Avengers was playing through the story. And
right.
Like, but that story was what, 5-7 hours? Like it was just like this.
It was 10 to 12 when it first came out. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like condensed, but I thought it was great. I enjoyed it. But you're 1,000% right. This all goes off the demo. I also like on the demo side of it, I think a lot of it ends up being where it's like, this is as best we can get. Let's just get our money. Let's build out whatever we feel is sellable. Yeah, we're not going to go back and fix it because it's okay, guys, buyer beware in that regards. But
right,
it frustrates me, and it plagues every aspect from the demo all the way up through like these big multiplayer games. Like hell, even I would say Call of Duty does that. Like year over year, it's like there's been bugs and issues that I've experienced in their games, hands down, where it's like, why is this a problem? Like it's like to the like why?
Well, you expect it, but you shouldn't have to still expect it after all this time.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no customer protection whatsoever in this stuff, and they can hide it because if let's say you can return a game after the first 4 hours and the game's 12 hours long, well, they'll make the first 4 hours of that game really good. Right. And then you're like, all right, I'm buying it. And then hour 5, you're like, oh, well, what happened here?
When I think some games, there's probably examples I don't know of that are from now where the game changes after the first bit, and maybe it gets better. But for some people that might still be like if you play the first level of Battletoads, and then you could decide whether or not you're going to buy it. You're going to buy it.
Yeah, and then you get to.
But then you're going to get your balls broken. And either you're going to like that and like, yes, I like this is harder. I wanted the challenge. I'm gonna figure this game out. Or you're going to be like, wow, I thought this was Ninja Turtles and it's not.
Right.
So there's got to be modern examples of that. That's a really dated example, and that's the quality arguably going up, right? But then if it's not what you thought you were getting, and now I could watch somebody play for an hour and I could see pretty far into the game.
I think Game Pass, I mean, Xbox has been doing this a while now, like with the preview program. It's sort of like a demo. It's partial of the game there. And you're only paying a monthly fee for all of these games. So if it's a full-fledged game, or if it's a smaller game, larger game, you get to try these games out with not having this problem of, well, I'm 8 hours in and I feel like I got ripped off for $30. Now with Game Pass, now with the PlayStation model, where they're doing with the trial period, you would hope that the morals of the company that's making the game is giving their best foot forward for the first impressions of that game, and they also put it throughout the game to the very end and love the craft that they're doing. Now, obviously, are there going to be people that take advantage of the $3.1 billion industry or whatever it is that the video game industry is, that people are like, hey, you know what, we can make a quick buck if we just put this game out there and we can make a lot of money. Of course, there's always going to be people like that. So you would hope that what's happening right now with the game that you played is not the majority, but the minority of what's happening in the indie game development side. Yeah.
We need to also make sure that there is a big difference between a demo and a trial. The trials that Sony is doing is you download the whole game and they set a timer. So it's not a vertical slice. It's not like somebody's referencing Outriders. Like the Outriders demo actually ran better than the full release. Like it had less bugs and stuff, which was freaking weird. But it was smaller. It was a vertical slice. It, for whatever reason, was more polished, or maybe not more polished. It didn't have everything turned on, and once everything gets turned on, it kind of gets corrupt. So I was just curious, if we were kind of worried that would be the result of like, well, everybody's going to make their games front heavy. I think there'll be games that might do it.
Yeah, it's a definite risk, and I think it will happen with some games.
Yes. but I don't think it'll be the norm. Like, people use No Man's Sky as an example of like, well, games are just going to launch and they're going to be crap because since we're just going to like we're just going to support them remaking the game. I'm like, I really don't think so, because a lot of games have launched and been really bad, and it's really, really hurt the company. Like, look at CD Projekt Red and Cyberpunk, what that did to their stock value. The valuation of the company went down significantly. They didn't come out of that smelling like roses just because they made a bunch of money on the front end. So I don't think that'll turn into a business strategy. Like, they're not going to sit in a boardroom and be like, guys, I got an idea. Like, look at No Man's Sky. Let's push out a piece of garbage and then we'll just fix it later. I think similarly, I don't think companies are going to say, let's just make the first 4 hours great and then everything else can suck, because that will bite you eventually, because the reviews will catch up, the strategy will hurt you. And you also have to remember, the trial is set according to like game length. Like, you can play Horizon Forbidden West for 5 hours before buying it, because they know the more invested you get, if you get that far, you're buying the game because you're so far in. And I do think the question of end game is where some of this is coming. Like, I do think so many games fumble the end game because it's so easy to build a set of stairs, right? Oh yeah, you're progressing, you're getting. What do I do when I get to the top? And a game that was notorious for this was Anthem. And Anthem is kind of our final topic in a way, tangentially, because there's rumors that we're getting an Iron Man game and it's from EA. And I had the theory that Anthem Next and Anthem 2.0 got shuttered because they're like, hey, we got the Iron Man license, shut the whole thing down. Mike, kick this one off for us.
See, I didn't know you did this. So I have the same theory. And the reason for this is because Anthem got shut down back in February of 2021, right? That was the last time. Right, on its birthday, and it said, we're done supporting this game, right? And if you guys watched, I think it was episode 1 or 2, I brought up a topic about how I was so disappointed in Marvel games, right? The Marvel games, they're coming out with mobile games like the Puzzle Quest and the Marvel Future Revolution and the Snap. And I was like, I really want Marvel to come out with real games like a Batman, like a Spider-Man with other characters. And man, I put that out there, and now we have 2 games coming out, which is Black Panther and Iron Man, maybe, right? But they're coming from a company I didn't want them to do, which is EA. So I asked for the wrong thing. I said, oh, great, I want these Marvel games, but they're coming with a company that I really don't want them to do this. Now, when they ended Anthem, the first thing when we saw Anthem from back in 2017, we're like, oh man, it's like Iron Man, right? Like, that is Iron Man, right? My kid still calls Anthem the Iron Man game. That's what he calls it, okay? Yep. And he dresses like him. He has the same color patterns as him, right? He even says that the tank, the Colossus is the Hulkbuster, right? This is what my son has made up in his head, and that's what he's 7, okay? So they stopped supporting it in February, and now all of a sudden we hear rumors of EA working on Black Panther and also maybe working on Iron Man. Well, a year and a half into the life cycle of this game that's potentially being made that we don't know much about. But isn't it kind of ironic that EA stopped supporting? They told us they were coming out with Anthem 2.0, and then all of a sudden they just cut the legs out of it and said, this is a lost cause. But what do people like about this? They like that it's an Iron Man game, and they made that flawless in the flying aspect of it, right? So much so that when Marvel came out with Marvel's Avengers, we're like, if they bring Iron Man in this game, they better make it as good as Anthem for the flying mechanics, right? And that's exactly, and we were excited that they did not
do that.
Right, but it was close enough to it, right? So you would hope that EA is going to take this technology, which they forced on BioWare. Now, we don't know what studio is doing it because it's just a rumor that EA is making it. So we don't know what studio is making Black Panther. We don't know what studio is making Iron Man. But would they take that slice of the Frostbite engine that they created originally just for Anthem, for that flying, and then use that to make an Iron Man game? So I didn't know you came up with it. I came up with it from this aspect of it. And I was like, well, it's a year and a half into the making of this game, and now we're hearing of it. So they could potentially make an Iron Man game with the technology they used with the Frostbite engine for Anthem. Now, would that be cool? Now you're thinking, like, here's the thing that I don't want to happen. Because we looked at the Anthem game and said, oh, this is be a great Iron Man game. And now EA is making an Iron Man game. well, now are we going to look at this and go, oh man, they got the flying better in Anthem than they did in this game, or this is too much, right? This is too much like Anthem, because now just take Anthem's board away and put a city in there instead of a wide open area where it's like a Spider-Man, Manhattan or whatever. Now you're traversing through that. Is that too similar? Like, is it going to be a story-driven game where are we going to be MCU Tony Stark? Are we going to be comic Tony Stark? Are we going to be brand new Tony Stark that doesn't look anything like the MCU? Obviously, nobody knows nothing about this right now. I'm just trying to think, like, I really want a Marvel game to succeed and be well. Like, the Guardians of the Galaxy, I still haven't played it, but I watched people play it, and it seemed really interesting. But what the turnoff of that game was, they didn't look like the Guardians of the Galaxy that I think they would have looked like. You know what I mean? Like, because we had that MCU in our heads. And I just didn't like their style of it. Now that Iron Man is in the works potentially, what do you guys think? Do you guys think they'll make like an Assassin's Creed type of game, open world-esque like that? Or do you think they make more of a God of War, Spider-Man type of game with Iron Man? And how do you think the mechanics would work as far as the flying mechanics, right? Because they have to nail that. And you would have to assume they're taking the technology they got from Anthem to do this game.
I would rather see a Spider-Man style Iron Man. My play style, that would be more appealing to me. I don't know. It'd be hard to make the Anthem flying work in a cityscape, I think, because it's the tight corners. They'd have to do something to make it so that if you wanted to do like a quick fly through, okay, like in the movies, but sometimes you're needed to stop and turn quickly. So how does that work? Is it fun to do? Is it the control style good? but like the combat could be a lot more like Infamous. Iron Man's would be good for kind of melee or up close projectile combat, not so much and maybe a different kind of combat mode for flying, almost like you go if you're out of the city and doing like aerial combat or like a dogfight like in a space sim game. But I would think more on the ground combat could be a lot like Infamous or Spider-Man and be really fun. And if they could make Anthem's flying work in a cityscape, then I think that would also be great.
I don't know. Like the part of me is like, I really wish they did 2.0 for Anthem, and I think I
just want Anthem.
I feel like I could, like I said, I would if they did come out with an Iron Man game.
It would be your Anthem 2.0. You would look at it and go, oh, this is the 2.0 we should have had.
Well, and that's the question. Is like, is this a single player game or is this going to be some multiplayer game as a service game? And if it's not like games as a service, does that serve EA's need, especially in terms of like numbers where we're like, yes, Guardian of the Galaxy is well played, but praised, but apparently it's not doing the numbers that people had hoped. And then when you look at what Sony's willing to, like, what they're hunting is they're hunting for more games as a service, and that's where it's like, I wondered if EA had a hit, like if they wouldn't have had any problems with their original acquisition or originally trying to be acquired in that regards. But
EA did make Jedi Fallen Order. I mean, it's underneath their moniker, so they could potentially make a good game. Well,
Respawn.
I know.
Maybe.
That's why I said not them, but they're still underneath EA. Right?
Yeah. No, EA's got a winner. They do. They got the Star Wars game. And then
what about if Respawn is making the Iron Man game? You know what I mean?
I don't know. They're super busy.
I know
if you did an Anthem 2 and it was good, that would be received as being pretty great. If you did an Iron Man game and it was just good and not anywhere near as good as Spider-Man,
right, people will be like, they should have made Anthem 2.0.
It'll be a big disappointment.
Right.
So I think
that's my concern is that all of a sudden it's like, all right, let's say it's like, we just put a number and Iron Man 8.0 game. It's like, that's not going to move units. People aren't going to be excited about it. And even if they nail the like Anthem flying and it's got those things, I think ultimately that's just going to remind people that, man, they really like screwed up with what Anthem could have been and should have been, especially like when you start to look at how the landscape is today, like having another kind of looter shooter out there to really kind of go toe to toe with content would have been really great in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, we're all dying for another looter shooter because there's one, and if you don't like it or you can't play it, you gotta find something else. I mean, my thing with Anthem versus Iron Man is they probably, if in fact our theory, if we're sniffing around the right thing and if we're close to being accurate, They probably just said, listen, as an IP, this automatically makes us more money. Like, there's just no way Anthem will ever be the revenue generator that Iron Man would be. A mediocre Iron Man game will absolutely generate more money than Anthem would. And that's more than likely how they made the decision, because getting that license, getting the ability to make an Iron Man game, that's pretty big. I mean, especially in the West, he's probably up there right now as far as being pretty iconic. Now, nobody competes with Spidey. Spidey globally is insane. Like, I'm interested in Steam sales charts for Spider-Man next week, because holy moly, Spidey is God. He's the God, okay? And I don't care who you like the most. Like, across the globe, he's king. So that's likely, though, what motivated this purchase, or this move, I mean, is that, listen, Iron Man is going to make us way more money than Anthem. And as sad as it makes me, to go back to Mike's question, though, because, it does make me sad. We watched Ranger footage of the, like, just flying around.
I'll have to go back and watch your video of it.
I loved the world. I guarantee you I had people clicking on my stream, and they probably thought it was the Iron Man game leaked. They were like, because it looks like Iron Man, like the way he moves. And the thing that we noticed, and this is where Cityscape would be tough, kind of like what Derek was talking about, you need a ton of space. It's not a normal game. It's not like a game where, like, you can hop on your horse and it feels big. No, if you walked around this game, it would take you way too long to get anywhere, because they have to make the space for the flying. So I don't even know if Cityscape would work, because it would feel cramped. It would kind of feel like, as I've said in Dark Souls, when they make me fight, when they make me fight a salad shooter in a closet, I get really grumpy. It's like, don't make me fight in a closet. And Iron Man might feel like that. Like, don't make me fly around in a closet, because you need space. So they might have to go space, take him to space, take him somewhere else, take him to maybe iconic locations. Like in Jedi Fallen Order, you almost have good set pieces that you go to. You'd have Iron Man going to good set pieces, so the combat and flight could flourish, instead of feeling like you just sort of threw him in New York and he's running into buildings and it's not fun.
Right. I wish, I know Insomniac's making a Wolverine game, and there's rumors there's a new Deadpool game maybe in the works somewhere down the line. There's also there's the Wonder Woman game coming out, in development. I really wish that Marvel, would make a MCU of gaming, I've talked about this on my own podcast, where it would be really cool if Black Panther came out, and you played the single player aspect of Black Panther, and then a year later, all of a sudden they come out with Iron Man, and then you play Iron Man that year, and then the next game comes out and you're playing as Captain America, and then 5 years down the line, all of a sudden they have the Avengers game that we all wanted, where you're actually now combining all of them together in one game, And you look at what companies could do this, and I hate to say it, but EA is already in bed with Disney because of Star Wars, And they just opened the door and said, "Hey, how about we do some Marvel games?" And EA, and Disney's like, "Yeah, sure. We want anyone to make games." That's why they're making Wolverine in Insomniac. That's why they're making other games for other developers. But it would really be cool if they made one multiverse of games, and then down the road, and EA is one of those companies that could do it because they're so big, and they could potentially do the work. Now, I hate to say that because it's EA, and I'm not a really big fan of EA, but there are those gems, Like, my favorite game is Battlefield Bad Company 2. Like, I used to love the Battlefield series. That's an EA game, Jedi Fallen Order, that's an EA game, So they do have these gems that could come out. I just hope that they just don't do a half-ass job with any of the games that they're making.
How did you not just describe an NFT? Even though it's own contained within an IP or within.
Well, no, I don't want an NFT.
That's what an NFT is.
Well, no, they're staying with. They each make their separate own characters. I'm not saying anything about combining it into you're adding on to it. You're buying each standalone game itself, and then they make a full game, like a full story. You know what I mean?
Essentially,
right. But in terms of you having a character and have played and being able to take that into
no, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying.
I was like,
no.
Oh man, the programming is like, that is so hard.
No. What I'm saying is you're playing a single player game of Black Panther. You're playing a single player game of Iron Man. Then those characters that they put in those games, they make one game, And
I gotcha.
You're bringing those heroes all into the same game as one.
I thought you were saying like if you had played the Black Panther game, then all of a sudden you can get stuff in the next one and the next one. It's like from a like, and that's the thing that the irony of the
impossible
that I was laughing about. Right. Oh, it's just a lot. It's so much work. It's like, oh man, okay, I need to know about this, and it's like we saw something like that Mass Effect where the story would carry over, and that's kind of the irony about the whole NFT drama. It's like we already have that. You can do that without the use of the blockchain. Just look for your save file and see if you've got this. So, especially now with the cloud, it's so much easier. But yeah, I thought you were saying like if I had played Black Panther, then all of a sudden I can take Black Panther into the Iron Man game and play as Iron Man, Black Panther in the Iron Man game. I was like, well, oh boy, like, but I get what you're saying now from a narrative perspective.
Yeah, narrative story driven. Yeah, that's all
on each other, and then ultimately conclude into one story with the characters themselves. That would be cool. I'd be all for that.
If Assassin's Creed Infinity influences the market in the way that I think it's going to, you might end up with games like that, because I think that's essentially what they want to do with Assassin's Creed Infinity is say, let's just build a platform, and then we throw
adding to it.
Yeah, we throw worlds and characters and experiences into it. You could totally do that with MCU. You could do that with the DC universe. You could say, listen, just build a platform, and then just every year you're adding a whole new story and character that you can build and play as, and then it's all there. It's almost like it's essentially an MMO live service type game with those universes.
That's what I think Grand Theft Auto 6 Online is going to do. I think Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to do exactly that. They're going to take like Liberty City, San Andreas, Vice City, and they're slowly going to implement them into the online portion of that game, so it just gets bigger and bigger, and you have this Grand Theft Auto universe or Grand Theft Auto world type of thing. Because they did say they could make the world, right? They did say in an interview like 3 years ago that they could do it, and I was like, well, that just seems like a really smart idea on the online aspect of it.
Yeah. I always think with superheroes too, there's certain heroes that would be really tough. Like I don't know if we'll ever get a good Superman game, and I think
impossible.
Flying, I think, is the big challenge. Like flying, and then what is Superman doing? Because
there is no good game there.
Yeah, it would have to be him. I've talked about this on my stream many times. Literally last night on our stream, you would have to make a Superman game where either he's young and you're like leveling him up and he's learning his powers. That's like your skill tree as you're getting older, and then like the end game would be like you are now finally Superman and you're going up against a supervillain or something, or you have to make him go outside of the world of Earth and fight actual like beings from other dimensions and stuff like that. Otherwise, be like, okay, it's him and he's weak because the guys he's fighting have kryptonite on them. You know what I mean? Like, something cheesy stuff like that.
Yeah.
The perpetual disrespect that is low key just shoved in the face of Green Lantern as a character and as a potential game. I want Green Lantern. I want it yesterday.
It would be a good game because he has.
Want Ryan Reynolds to play him?
Oh my gosh, it would be a good game because he has his abilities are like kind of limitless. Like he can do anything.
He's one of the best characters in the first Injustice game as far as using him to do cool stuff in a fight.
Yeah. I would play a Green Lantern game. I wonder. Is that tough to make? Because is he flying and is he really strong? Yes and yes. Okay, well, how do you translate that into a good experience?
Right.
Because it'd almost be dizzying to fly and to be that fast and strong. Like the Man of Steel movie, I actually thought they did an excellent job being like, this is what it would be like if two crazy strong guys were fighting. It's nuts. They're fast. They're destroying buildings by accident. I actually thought it was pretty dope.
But I don't think it makes a good game.
No, because you're in control, and you're like, oh, I don't know what I just did. Oh, I flew through Times Square and I killed people. Whoops. Like, sorry,
Oops,
everybody.
I flew past that building. Oh well, there goes those 2 floors.
Just rip the glass off.
Well, why not? Let's just make it a sandbox, and Superman destroyed the world. It's like, all right, there you go.
The evil ending of Injustice 2, where he does take over the world.
You just make it a dark Superman game. Just make it a dark Superman game, and he's just killing everybody, and the world turns against you. That would be good.
Then just make a mod, which they already have for Grand Theft Auto, and have fun.
Yeah. I struggle with
the Matrix thing or something like that, where they did that with this like Superman.
Yeah, they used that. They used that engine test tool to make a Superman game. Well, it was a demo.
Though. Yeah, there's mods though in Grand Theft Auto. You could be like the Hulk and Superman, and
you can be Thanos. Yeah, you can throw you can hurl moons at people.
Am I the only one that those games don't land on me, like the Just Cause games and Saints Row and that? Because after like an hour, I'm like, cool, it's just a destruction simulator. Like there's a frivolity to it. There's nothing other than just blowing stuff up and flying.
Well, let's be fair though. When you first played that game for the very first time, when they had an open world game, like if you're just playing Just Cause for the first time and you never played any other open world game, like if like your 7-year-old son, like he would think it's the greatest thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
But you're in your late 30s, 40s, and you're like, I don't really like these games anymore.
Yeah.
They're fun, but they're not fun for long.
Right, for long.
Yeah, they feel like a simulate. It's just like a destruction or combat simulator. Like there was a Dead Rising game like that. It was just zombies everywhere, and you're making exploding teddy bears and chainsaw bats, and it's just like for me, I know they're popular, but for me, I'm like, this is just absolute frivolity. There's nothing serious here. It's Just Cause was fun for an afternoon. And the crazy thing is they're so good. The wingsuit, and you can chain explosions and knock statues down. Like, they're actually dope. But I wonder if a really strong superhero game would fall into that category of like, this is just kind of silly. Everything's at the mercy of me, We're going to get some good superhero games, though. I think Wolverine will probably be a blend. It'll be somewhere in the middle of like Batman and God of War, the over-the-shoulder tough guy. And
that would be sweet.
Spider-Man 2 has got some voice acting excitement. I was watching Star Trek The Next Generation the other night, and Tony Todd shows up, who is Candyman. He's got like a real famous look and sound. I was like, is that Tony Todd? He was Worf's brother. And so I looked him up. He's doing the voice of Venom in Spider-Man 2, the video game. So I'm like, hey.
Eddie.
Yeah. Eddie. Yeah, that... we're not going to get that. Pile of heads, pile of bodies. We're not going to get that.
So funny, though.
It is a good movie. Sadly. Sadly, we won't get that. The second Venom was terrible, but the first one was fun.
We'll talk about this later down the road on another show, but Gotham Knights, man, has me a little worried about what that game is or not is, because we don't know much about it. But, man, they're showing off a little. Yeah, they showed the most boring. Did you watch the most boring tutorial in the world?
Golly, we watched it. It's a so I did a breakdown of that game. You guys are getting a little extra talk here. I did a breakdown of that game. That game is a mobile game, and they're going to push it. They're going to push it to mobile later, and everybody's going to be really angry. They spent $70 on a mobile game. She pivots on an axis. Her movement, I'm telling you, it's a mobile game. We broke down her movement and her attacks and everything. It's like, this is not a game like Batman or anything else or Spider-Man where you target people and you control in relation to the enemies. It's somewhere in between that and a mobile game, and I have no idea where this game where it came from, or what they built, what the foundation is they built on. But you go back and watch the early reveals.
I was just going to say, look at the early reveal a year and a half ago, and then look at what they showed now, and you're like, what is this?
I'm telling
Amateur hour.
Someone walked in the room and said, we want this to be on mobile. And I think ever since they've been trying to shove that combat system and all that movement and everything, they're trying to shove it into a mobile platform because, I don't know, it's weird. The whole thing's weird.
It's like a looter. You're gonna be grinding for materials to level up your gear, and I don't like it.
I think it looks like a train wreck simulator.
Oh man, it's scream as I unmute.
Cluster cuss simulator.
I love grinding for materials. I love grinding. It's like it is sometimes the most relaxing thing for me to do.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. If you look, there's a shot of they show the resources, and it's gray, green, blue, purple, gold, and orange, right? And there's little logos at the bottom of them for each faction. And the tail end, the high end and the low end, the general ones have all 5 logos at the bottom, and the high end materials also have the 5 logos at the bottom. Meaning you can get the high end materials from, I would assume, bosses or mini bosses for the high end stuff. And if you want to level up your gear, you're going to have to find certain material to put it towards that. And I don't know if that game's going to be good. Story-wise,
you guys like dumpster fires? You enjoy dumpster fire? Real good dumpster. You can cook some hot dogs on there. Get food poisoning.
Yeah.
Get food poisoning. Gotham Knights. That's the
It looks like Titans, the TV show. It looks like Titans, which is a terrible DC show.
Yeah, it's a CW video game. That's what it is.
That's what it looks like. I'm not kidding. You think I'm kidding?
I'm not. I know you're not kidding. It looks real bad.
I'll tell you when I'm kidding.
Here's the thing. I don't
so
want,
ominous.
I don't want to get this game right now, but I think I have to be one of those people that because of what I do, I have to buy it so I can show other people like don't get it. Right?
There's a part of me that gets
your sacrifice, sir.
Take one for the team.
I get irritated. I'm like, I have to buy this and play this. What the I don't want to do that, but we got to because people want to know. They're gonna want to see it. They're gonna want us to make.
I will quit my job before I play that game.
I'm gonna delete my YouTube. This is unconscionable.
I will play FIFA before I play that game.
Oh God, no! Don't do it, Derek. Don't do it.
Well, I tell you what, chat. This is a great time to start gifting memberships to pull some of these gray names over into the after show. I'm going to let Mike and Ginger talk about where you can find their content, and we're going to go into a members-only Reforge Roundtable after show. Also, don't forget, my brother and I are streaming tonight, 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be hilarious. You're starting to sense the humor is starting to infect the show, so we're going to take it to the members only. But before we do that, okay, 30. Where can they find you if they want to catch up with your content that you're making?
You can find me on youtube.com/30andstillgaming. That's the only place I stream now. We've moved over. We're not on Twitch anymore. You can find us Monday through Thursday mornings, back to school. So I started around 9 o'clock in the morning till about noon Eastern. I do a morning show called The Daily Grind. We go over news topics, pop culture. We've been doing it for about 3 years. And then in the evenings, we from 8 to about 10, we play 30 plays. That's Monday through Thursday as well. And then Thursday night, we do a podcast, which is the flagship of our whole channel. It's called Generation X Gaming. It's a weekly podcast that goes over a few of the top stories in the past week, and we rant along the way. So you can check that out. And on Google it, 30 and Still Gaming, you'll find me.
Ginger, where can I find you, my friend?
The easiest place to start is over on Ginger Prime. I've been hanging out also in chat for this, so just be sure to click any of the links that are provided as a part of the. I don't know if they're in the description or what have you, but start with Ginger Prime, and then there you'll find any kind of focus channel for some of the MMOs that I'm very excited about diving in deeper. Now, I just put out a kind of my review for like my 10 hours with the multiverses. Couldn't know why I drew a blank. I was like, it's versus. What am I struggling with? So I actually do a couple of more variety stuff on Prime, and on Friday nights we hang out over on Twitch. Tonight's actually kicking off at 7 p.m. So we're playing New World, and if you've been curious about jumping back in, you can come hang out in the Discord. You don't have to actually watch the stream; it doesn't matter. But the stream access is just kind of like, as I said, it's a giant text message. For those of you who want to join us. So last week we ran all throughout, just doing this big 15-person like raid out in the open world, closing all these portals just for fun because we had a lot of people of different level ranges, and hopefully this week we'll actually do our own Merkguard run raid tonight. But we'll see what happens if we get the same crew we got last week. It should be fun. If we don't, if it's smaller, we'll do dungeons and whatnot.
Well, every week we are here, if you're listening to this elsewhere, live on Reforge Gaming on YouTube, and we have moved it to 2 p.m. Eastern. I will be out of town next week, so now that we've got the full roundtable back, we are going to have to take that week off. But from here on out, you should see me, Ginger Prime, 30 and So Gaming here every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern, and we do like to follow the show with that after show for members, so if you are a member, you get to come with us. There'll be a link in chat just in case redirect doesn't work. If you're not a member, you can push that blue join button or the join. There's like a member's command in the description, or type !join in the chat. And we do appreciate that support. And I'm not going to let Derek say where his content is because he doesn't do that. So
you can find me on MySpace. MySpace.com.
Him and Tom are hanging out, still doing the thing. So there's a link in chat just in case redirect doesn't work, and I am going to go ahead and press live on this as soon as it lets me, and we are going to transition into the Reforge Roundtable after party, after show. I'm trying to vamp and fill, and YouTube's being slow. There it goes. Hey, if you clicked on this and you weren't here live for it on Friday, it's the Reforge Roundtable After Show, and we just kind of cut up. Might get a little not safe for work, and we do this afterwards just for members. So if you weren't here live, make sure you're here every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Also, make sure you're in the Discord. The Discord's a great way to not miss out on content. That Discord link is in the description below. You could also just type discord.gg/ReforgeTV if you don't want to miss out on this content. can also follow us on Twitter at Reforge TV. We just got a new member at the end of the last show, so thank you for doing that, Mayhem. I'm going to go ahead and end that show and bring everybody over.
We'll see you on the other side.